Welcome to No More and Guess Less with Teresa. Welcome back, guys. So we are still on Persuasion, and remember, it's all about voluntarily changing, forming and sustaining the attitudes and behaviors of our persuadees. Now, persuasion can happen in many different scenarios, and this is exactly what I want to dive into with you today. The context of persuasion determines who's involved in the persuasive encounter and also what the setting is.
I can't believe it!
Starting off with the smallest level of persuasion, we're looking at the intrapersonal level. Intra means, of course, within. And just like you are talking to the self, about the self, with the self, you can, of course, also convince yourself of something. How many times did I have to convince myself to go to the gym or to not have that second piece of cake? Well, that is intrapersonal communication.
I can't believe it!
The context in which persuasive forces are actually the strongest is the dietic communication context. A dyad, which is D-Y-A-D, not D-I-E-T, the dietic communication context happens between two people. So it's your interpersonal context, really. And as I pointed out, the persuasive power is the strongest. The forces are the strongest. Think about this example. When you go to the shop and there's a salesperson, they can come up to you, they can explain the where to you, they can answer your questions, they can react to you. And this is what most organizations want to bring about for their customers. But of course, it's also very expensive to create this interpersonal setting between the organization and all the customers.
I can't believe it!
The third context is a very interesting context. It's the small group level of persuasion or communication. I mentioned in the first podcast that in groups we sometimes feel peer pressure, where our behavior shows one thing, but our attitudes are actually not there yet. Your parents, I'm sure, have told you before, oh, if everybody jumps off the bridge, you would too. That's a classic example of peer pressure, and you do know that group scenarios and group dynamics have a strong effect on your behavior and on your attitudes, and therefore have strong persuasive effects.
I can't believe it!
The next communication level is the public one. When we are talking about public communication, we usually are in a scenario where there is one speaker and a large audience. So your political communication during rallies would be such a context. Most of the public communication that is happening today is actually broadcast. Therefore, you will have the persuasive forces of the actual public encounter, and then added to that is the persuasive force of the mass communication broadcast, which nicely leads to our next level, which is mass communication.
I can't believe it!
Now, of course, as you know, mass communication has to do with an organizational sender sending a message through some sort of technology that can multiply that message to a rather large and heterogeneous and diffused audience. Your advertising is the classic example of persuasive attempts in mass communication. And as you know, you're being bombarded by adverts, not only on your social media platforms, but also on television, on the radio, on billboards, and so on and so forth. So that's all mass communication. Please keep in mind, there are more traditional media like newspapers, radio, and television. Sometimes they're also called above-the-line media. And then there are the new media like your social media, your electronic media, and so on. Of course, advertisers love this particular level of persuasion, but they sometimes overestimate the immediate effect that it has on the behavior of the consumers.
I can't believe it!
An interesting last level to look at in communication, or better to say persuasion for our purposes, is vertical communication. Yes, some of you actually have a relationship with the higher power and do talk and communicate with that higher power. For many religious individuals, there is a lot of persuasive force in the religion or in what they believe the higher power wants them to do. For example, in the Muslim religion, it is one of the 5 pillars to give alms to the poor, to aid the poor. So you would be convinced to give some small change or give some food to the beggars on the road because of that religious tie-in. You can also see vertical communication in the organizational setup. Any type of top-down or bottom-up communication is indeed vertical, and we are quite aware of the fact that if a superior talks to a subordinate, that the persuasive power is quite strong because the superior is on a higher level of power than the subordinate. So if there are unequal power relationships within an encounter, persuasive forces are usually in favor of the person on the higher level.
I can't believe it.
So these are the different contexts or levels of persuasive communication. And ask yourself, what kind of context do you utilize a lot in order to convince others or to persuade others? Or in which context are you being influenced a lot? I hope you enjoyed it, Schnookies. Until next time, bye!